How is that a rules-based international order? Basically, the way it feels to much of the global south is the U.S. stands for peace and human rights when it suits our interests, but then turns a blind eye when our ally does the exact same. So I think this, from an international perspective, I don't think everything President Biden has tried to do to reset the clock when it comes to the horrible things Trump did to ruin America's image abroad, this conflict is going to do the exact same thing, that all the things that Trump did to make America's image horrible in the eyes of in the world. This is a very similar scale, where it feels like the U.S. stands with peace when it suits our interest only, and not when it involves another situation.
You had a State Department official last week, Josh Paul, resign over our support for Israel. We had, I think, 411 members of the Capitol Hill staff, both Jewish and Muslim, sign a letter, basically demanding an immediate ceasefire in Gaza. Do you hear from, are these actions effective?
I think they're very effective. And, if you are a government official watching this, you are the main reason why President Biden has even said a word to Netanyahu to demand humanitarian aid. The people in the White House and the people in Congress, the staffers who are standing up and saying enough is enough, is the main reason why we're moving this forward. But I will say, I'm very concerned that my Democratic Party leadership has its head in the sand when it comes to the 2024 election. The path to the White House runs through Michigan, and Michigan runs through Dearborn and Detroit, which are two of the largest Arab American and Muslim American cities in the country. And just on Friday, Representative Debbie Dingell, who's not a leftist, who's not a major progressive, said she's represented that community for years, and she said she's concerned about the 2024 election. I know how important it is to defeat Trump as a Muslim American, as a Democratic strategist, but the blank check of violence our president is providing Bibi Netanyahu, Muslim Americans oppose it, Arab Americans oppose it, young people oppose it. And so Michigan, just like there was low Democratic turnout for Hillary Clinton in 2016, what I am seeing is there will be low Democratic turnout for Joe Biden in 2024 in the same state that Hillary lost.
Is there a generational gap here? It seems President Biden is from a different era of politics, where the actions that he's taking, the approaches that he's taking, are probably consistent with the way that Congress functioned, the way that governments functioned with each other for the majority of his life, right? And you see maybe a different generation of not just politicians, but the electorate who have a different set of expectations, like the ones that you're articulating.
I think that's a big part of it. Look, but it's also a pre-9/11 thing when it came to Ronald Reagan. People forget this, but Ronald Reagan, President George H.W. Bush, Bill Clinton held the Israeli government way more accountable than anyone post 9/11 did. I think there's been this fear and culture of Islamophobia that has pervaded since 9/11, where we cannot treat the Palestinian people and their authorities in the West Bank, the Palestinian Authority, with equal footing as the Israelis. On the voter level, there's absolutely a generational thing. As this millennial generation that opposed the Iraq War in 2003 comes to political age, comes to voting age, the Democratic Party is fundamentally different than it was 15 years ago. And I think President Biden, his chief of staff, the advisors around him are thinking about this Democratic Party as if it was from 15 years ago. But look, Arab and Muslim Americans are now civically engaged, are politically engaged. We didn't have a Rashida Tlaib 15 years ago. We didn't have an Ilhan Omar. And having those political representatives, having that political voice, makes more people more courageous to step out, more courageous to protest. I remember after 9/11, so many Muslim families, even though they were experiencing hate crimes or bigotry, were afraid to speak out, were afraid to protest, were afraid to rally because of the chilling culture, because of the Patriot Act. Now you have a new generation, many of whom were born in this country, who are inspired by the civil rights movement, are inspired by the Black Lives Matter movement, and are saying, no, I am an American, I deserve my voice to be heard, and I am going to protest my government, and I'm not going to be afraid. And I think that is the reason you're seeing so many people, thousands of Jews, thousands of Arabs, thousands of Muslims, thousands of young people oppose this. The vast majority of voters under 45 do not support sending Israel more weapons without any strings attached to address the political grievances of the Palestinian people. And if that doesn't happen, you can say goodbye to Michigan.
You had 13 Democratic members of Congress introduce a resolution to call for a ceasefire, whether or not that is allowed to get to a full vote, etc. How does this rift end up manifesting?
I think this will be a deep rift going forward. You know, many people have reached out to me and said, you know, Waleed, like a year from now, who knows what happens? But people will remember that this president took 5 days to call the family of Wadi al-Bayoum. People will remember that the members of Congress held a bipartisan vigil for only Israeli civilian, mourning only Israeli civilian deaths and not Palestinian deaths. This comes back to the fundamental point. Are Palestinian lives equal to Israeli lives in the eyes of our government? And until that question is addressed, you will continue to see this rift deepen on the elected level, on the staff level, on the voter level. Morale is, as you've seen resignations, as you've seen letters across government bodies in this country, morale is incredibly low if you work in government right now. And that will continue to deepen unless people feel like they are treated with equal respect, equal humanity as Jewish Americans, as Jewish Israelis, who also deserve dignity and respect and humanity. But I have so many people in my life who are Democratic strategists, progressive strategists, government officials, who feel sick to their stomach showing up to work because they're being silenced, they're not being treated equally, they're being kicked out of rooms, they're not being allowed to attend meetings, they're being told they're Hamas sympathizers, that because they're Muslim, they don't see, or they're Arab, they can't see this correctly. And, you know, this is what I mean. Like 15 years ago, we didn't have this level of Muslim American or Arab Americans in government offices as much as we do now. And so I just think the Democratic Party has fundamentally shifted, but I don't think President Biden's thinking about the party has shifted.
Democratic strategist Waleed Shaid, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you so much.